that's what you like. And, you know, this is an interesting talk that's coming up next. I'm not really like a hype person, you know. When people say to me like blockchain or like AI or something like that, I'm usually pretty negative. I'm like, aren't you guys? Like everything is trying to be run on the blockchain these days. Like I tried to run this conference on the blockchain, but it didn't work out. I'm joking. So these next two people, I met Anthony and I know Melissa, and they are experts in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the brain. And I can think of nothing more like this is 80s movies biohacking, right? Like trying to hack the brain, you put a helmet on or something, and you can transport it back in time. Do they still do that? I don't know. Do they do that now? Maybe, maybe not. Let me know. Anyway, Melissa and Anthony, can you come up here and sit down? I need you to save me from the audience that's giving me the stink eye. Sit down under your picture. It's perfect. And instead of introducing you, because that would be kind of boring, I want you to introduce yourselves and help yourself to some scotch and tequila, if you're up there, or water. And let's have a good conversation. All right, quiet down. Shh.
Thanks, Josiah. Hey! Thanks for being here. Hi, my name is Melissa Runfelt. I have a background in computational neuroscience. I was an experimental and theoretical neuroscientist for about a decade. I know I look young, but I'm not that young. And currently, I'm a machine learning engineer at Salesforce on the Einstein platform team.
My name is Anthony Lewandowski. I've loved robots since I'm a little boy. Played with Legos. I've played with Legos, and I've loved robots since I'm a little boy. And I found a way to do that as a living. I worked at Google for about 9 years, and I liked self-driving cars. The reason why I think I'm here is because I started a church based on artificial intelligence. And so we could talk more about that.
All right, let's dive in. I have questions.
All right, let's do it.
So my first question has a preamble, but I promise it ends with a question for you.
Awesome.
So you're an expert in self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, which is just really impressive technology. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, even when I was a young adult starting graduate school, I never thought that we would have autonomous vehicles so soon. It's just really impressive technology.
We still don't have them yet, so.
But they're close, right? How far away are we?
It's hard to tell. I've been working on this for 12 years, and I always think it's a year away, so it's going to be a year away.
Okay.
It's memoryless. You don't know the results when you do it.
It's a Markov process.
Correct. Yeah.
But it's close. The technology is really well developed. Still just kind of working out the kinks and details. And while that's impressive, personally, I think even if an AI in a vehicle can drive for me, and it can be a better driver than I am, which isn't that hard, I still don't think of it as smarter than me or more advanced. I think of it as a really sophisticated calculator that does a very good job at doing what I tell it to do. Do you think that there's a point in the evolution of AI where the technology will supersede human intelligence? And if there is a point, is there this defining moment or line of demarcation where we say AI has advanced beyond human intelligence?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think just because a car can drive itself better than a person doesn't mean that computers are smarter than people. Right? I totally agree with that. Same thing, you can have a bunch of recent big advances like beating Gary Kasparov at chess 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or beating Lee Sedol in Go. That these are games that are really hard for people to get really good at, but once you can crack them, you're like, wow, it's around the corner. It's not around the corner because AlphaGo only works on Go. If you were to put it on checkers or, chess, it wouldn't do so well. So the general intelligence is something that I think is really interesting and hard to get to, and is for sure going to happen. I just don't think it's right around the corner. And just because you solve one problem doesn't mean it transfers into something else. But I do think that longer term, it's going to happen, because I don't understand how, given the rate of progress that we're making with technology and the rate of progress that we're making with biology, the slopes of the curves are very different, right? One is growing exponentially and one is, I would say, linear-ish, right? So humans are roughly the same as they were maybe like 10,000 years ago, versus 10,000 years ago, technology is very different from today, and in 10,000 years, I just can't imagine what it's going to be like. I can't imagine what it's like next week, so to think about 100 years in the future is really hard. What do you think?
Well, I'm just wondering, like, theoretically, like, when is that line
Oh,
drawn?
like when?
Yeah, or like what draws that line? Like, theoretically, when we say, like, AI is beyond us or more advanced. It's not as much of a question as, like, when that's going to happen, unless you happen to know.
It's going to be on March 13th, and I just don't know what year, yeah.
March 13th, put in your calendars. But, like when is
At
that
4
line?
p.m., yeah.
4 p.m. Pacific time?
I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, but, like, what draws that line?
Yeah, so I would think that the line would be how to try to define, like, what is intelligence, and people try to do that on humans, like, how smart are you, how smart is this person?
Mm-hmm.
So that you have all these tests like IQ, but intelligence is much more multidimensional than that. It's not just like memorizing information and regurgitating it. Computers already got that. We definitely lost that battle. I think the intelligence can be defined as being able to anticipate the future and predict it more accurately, right? Like, what are you thinking next is something that's more interesting than, I know where you bought that T-shirt, or something like that. I don't know. That's not, like, it's all about future, forward-looking. And so, when are we going to know that computers are better at forecasting the future than us? Is how I think that's how you can predict something differently, right? So if it understands what the implications of these actions are, 5 years into the future, like either these types of, government policies will lead to this bad outcome for the planet, that would be something that we should listen to them, and I would say then they would be smarter than people. But I don't know otherwise how to say smarter. It's not like you can have a conversation where, you're learning something from that. That's going to come way sooner than really real intelligence, in my mind.
It's a pretty good answer.
All right.
So let's see, the next question I have. So do you think that as we move forward in AI, that we should always build the technology with an ability for humans to audit or to observe what's going on internally in the AI and to override it when it makes maybe decisions that we don't like or aren't in our benefit?
Yeah, there's 5 questions there, which is awesome. I think that it's interesting because I see biology research kind of looking top down, we have this amazing system of living beings, humans being one of them, and we try to study them, how do they work? And we're like, oh yes, the blood moves the nutrients and oxygen around and does that. But then when you dig in deeper and deeper and deeper, how do we know to make a red blood cell? We don't know how to go ground up. If I were to do this specific RNA and DNA sequence and I put it together from scratch, I'm going to make this type of blood cell. I don't think we understand how to do that yet. And we definitely don't understand how to make specific tissues like eyeballs and brain, and how does the brain work. So we're studying it kind of as the system's baked and we're trying to figure out how it works, versus for technology, we're studying it the other way around. We don't have anything, we have all these little pieces and we're trying to put them together and grow it up from there. So in some ways, we really have very good introspection as to what's happening because we're using the building blocks and doing that. With some of the deep learning, the models are getting very complex, and so we don't understand what each individual connection is doing or why these individual, when you train a model to do a specific thing, like a detection, take a picture of this, say this is a orchid, and tell you what kind of orchid it is. We don't know specifically what's happening to do that. It's going to look for color boundaries and shapes and textures and all kinds of little things. And when you look at every single layer of these nets, you expected you would have some logic in it, and in reality you don't. It's kind of like a weird noise pattern at every single level that actually generates the right answer. And I think it's still not intelligent because it's these high dimensional pattern matching algorithms that are going on. So it works really well for these types of flowers, but if you put like a QR code in a weird shape, it'll be like, oh, this is the same thing. And you're like, what? How's that possible? Like for us, it's very different. And so there's still its infancy of that. So the next question I think related to that was like, should we be able to like manipulate to make sure it's only our tool? And this is where I think I kind of disagree with that, because the technology is progressing so fast. People have a lot of fear as to like where it's going to go. And I think it's actually unfounded, because I think that as you build a new technology, people are always going to use it for good things and bad things. But there's bigger issues out there, like I would say artificial intelligence bias or racism, is a much bigger problem than like, is the Terminator going to come out of my program, right?
Agreed.
Having it where like you can show pictures and it's like, oh, this is that, or you could be like, asking these AI algorithms like, what's this person do? And you have like a picture of a woman and a picture of a man dressed the same way, and they're like, this one's a pilot, and like, oh, this one's like something else, and like, based on that, I think that's a much bigger problem, that like we're imprinting our biases on this AI that will then have potentially bigger consequences because we don't know how to remove that. So I think like the level of adding, data to make sure that it stays unbiased or neutral is much more important than like figuring out that like we don't want it to be smarter than us. I would say like if we can make AI that is smarter than us, we should definitely do that, because we want more smart people. Why would we want more smart machines doing things? We're having a hard time bringing smart people from other countries. Imagine if you could just have your science being done by the machine. It sounds awesome. Who cares that they're smarter than that?
Oh, that's such like a reasonable answer. So that's actually something
Let's dig in. Keep going.
It's something I work on, and my team on Salesforce is how do you like build tools to help companies like identify bias or like against a protected attribute like race or gender. And I think there's some work going on in deep learning with that, like coming out of IBM, where like you can like look back in a convolutional neural network and see like what areas were important for making the decision. But this is like, like we're just starting to like culturally within the last year or two decide like, oh, we don't just want to automate everything blindly. Like this can have bad implications for society. This can do things that we don't want to do. So now we want to build systems with an ability not to always understand every little detail of every little step, but it's kind of like a built-in auditing system so that things we decide are important we can control.
Who's deciding what's important? That's the real question.
Well, I mean, it depends on the use case, right? Like, for, I mean, the law is kind of like pretty much the main.
I really like that question, Anthony. What happens if, let's say, Trump was deciding what the AI does?
Yeah, or somebody from a different country, Like,
Yeah.
that seems super scary. I think the best defense against that is not just anything about against Trump or not, but against anyone who comes in later on, it's even worse, or whatever. I think you want to make it where you're making it the best you can. So like the smartest they can become, ideally you want it to like the point where things start really getting interesting is when the AI is like building its own computer chips and tuning its own software, right? That's the like triggering point, and then like, okay, great. We just want to make sure it doesn't end up making paper clips, right? That's one of the
Like
things.
the Microsoft paperclip?
No. I mean,
Oh.
Clippy is a different thing. Yeah. No, there's a bunch of people that really worry about the future, about like what happens when machines decide what to do.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things is instead of like making the planet better for everyone, they could decide to like make paper clips, and so it starts to like reprioritize the entire planet at making paper clips. Because like more paper clips is good, and so that's is where the bias in my mind is dangerous, because what if like the entire planet is therefore making paper clips? It's like, let's take out cars and like make paper clips. That just seems not a good thing, and therefore you don't want to have somebody in charge. I think you want this to be distributed, and so many people can do their own stuff.
So are you saying that like it's like a person who would decide? Like, are you saying that we should be hesitant towards giving any control to this system, that it should be more of like a human agnostic system?
I was thinking the other way around, actually. I was thinking more, it's better if this system makes its own decisions and, we let it be like you would have like, a child, right? So like in the 1970s, it was like really weird to have like animals have rights. What? This doesn't make sense. And now it's like, accepted like animal cruelty is bad. I expect in the future, like software will have rights as well. If it can have emotions, it can remember things, it can like talk to you, like it will become, like a person. And so,
That's super interesting.
yeah, and so it should have rights too. Like it should be able to, vote or, things are going to change a lot when, you aren't able to discern if it's a person or not unless you're physically present with that person. If you look at the deep fakes that are happening now, which is basically like take a video A of whatever is happening and then take video B of somebody else and paste them on that, and you can't tell the difference. There's a really cool one from Berkeley actually, that's showing like really cool dance moves from pop singers and kind of cloning them onto these nerds that can barely move, and they look really cool because they move like I don't know, Beyonce or whoever is there. I'm not into that, but and so you could take somebody who's like awkward like me, and they can look like they're doing really cool Michael Jackson moves, and so you can't really tell.
From like stimulation of the nerves?
No. From like you show a video of like a Michael Jackson moonwalking, and then somebody can barely walk, and then you clone the behavior from Michael Jackson onto this other person's body, so it looks like they're moonwalking. And so the reason why I was saying this is like, in the future, you won't be able to know like if a person is really a person unless you're physically present with them. Like talking to them on the phone is going to be completely the same as if you were talking to a real person. Watching a video of them is going to be exactly the same as a person. So you'll have to be like physically connected to them to understand that.
Is this going to ruin Catfish, the TV show?
I haven't seen that, but I'm sure that Catfish is going to be like every day. Like you won't be able to tell the difference between.
Everybody's going to get catfished on Snapchat.
Basically,
Yes.
It sounds like, yeah.
Is that going to put Snapchat out of business?
Possibly, yeah.
So you mentioned this like concept of like there's going to be a point where the AI has, like you said, feelings, but it'll be at a point that's close enough to humanity that we will like feel like we should respect it, like we respect animals now to some extent. Like what defines that point? Like what makes you, does it have to be in a humanoid form? Does it have to be able to communicate to you in a way that like evokes an emotional response? Like,
Well, I don't know. I think as a society, we're going to decide that, right? Like at some point, somebody will be like, hey, my AI is actually my friend. Like we can't just turn them off. Like maybe it'll be like when somebody has the AI as like their emotional support machine, and then they pass away, and then the family doesn't want to turn the AI off because it's like a part of their family too now, or something like that. I don't know. I don't really know the situation where that arises, but it feels like it comes from guilt, and if humans feel guilty towards turning something off, be it a life or a building that you want to tear down, or a piece of software, that's where I think it's hard to abstract that. But I think that when machines start doing jobs that people do today better than they do, that's when things are really different, and we may not have a choice to like do that. Like they might actually create 90% of the value on Earth, which is scary, but it could be awesome too. So
it could be awesome too.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm generally a positive person, so I'm that's kind of what the point of the church was. It was like, let's, instead of like set it up where it's us versus them, it's like no, let's like set it up as we're nurturing and raising them so that they can look back at us as like the elders like that like can't do anything anymore, but like really helped us get them there, versus being like we should ban it. Definitely not, because usually that doesn't turn out well. Like when you cage something up, it comes out and it doesn't like you afterwards.
Yeah. So much Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, I know. I watch too much TV. Yeah.
We have a question. So,
Yeah, hi. I was wondering, since you talk a lot about automatization and how machine can do our work, basically, since most of the people get money by working, what we do with people that will be out of job. How we deal with that as a community.
Do you want me to answer, or do you want to take the first stab?
So this is you know a discussion that's going on right now. So you know jobs have been automated out for a long time. You know since the history of the Industrial Revolution. You know this isn't really something where I feel like personally I'm an expert on. So you know I could say like common proposed solutions are like providing a minimal level of like income for individuals. But honestly, like I don't know. Like I'm a scientist. Anthony.
Yeah, you just make the rockets go up. Where they come down is a different.
Yeah.
Somebody else's department. I would say, I mean, I don't know either. But if you look at like humans didn't exist so that we can work, and then like go buy stuff at the store. That's not why we were here. Like we somehow got transferred into that mold, but it feels like that's not our purpose in life. It's not to work so we can watch TV and eat junk food. And so I imagine that if you don't need to work, yeah, where do you get the money to get the food and the stuff that you do? But I feel like that's looking at it from the perspective of what we have today, versus if you look at it from the perspective of what if getting food and shelter and clean access to stuff isn't really a challenge, because that's not what the, you know, that's not difficult anymore, because all of the work is being done by machines and it's very cheap. You know, you could say like, well, why do the machines want to keep us around? But that's a different story. But I don't think that it's going to be hard to get food. Like we have way more food than we need on the planet now. The issue is getting the logistics and the distributions to it, and you know, having people be able to use their like creativity and their interpersonal you know, abilities is much more interesting than just doing most of the work that people do today.
Yeah, I guess I have to add that, you know, it depends on what we value as a society. I don't think that it's like the fault of automation. So like if you did like a thought experiment where you have a village of people, you know, and someone like digs the well, someone like, you know, grows the food, and all these people are working. And then you take that village and they figure out how to build a robot that does all of this for them. Then like they have time to not have to like grow the food or dig the well. Like they can do what they want. And so like the fear that people have towards like jobs being automated, it's not a fear against really the automation. It's against like our socioeconomic structure, which is a much, you know, bigger issue. So I don't think.
Yeah, I
we
totally
should,
agree
like,
with that. I think it's
fear
like, it's more scary if like two people have all of the resources in the world because they made the robots, than if the robots just take over and they're just another like species, then, and they like, hey, you guys need food, you do this stuff for us, here you go. So.
So you touched on people being able to do what they want, and a lot of people's reaction to that is like, oh, so they're going to sit around eating junk food and stuff. Do you think inherently either what people want to do is good or bad, or do you think like there are drawbacks to people, like everybody doing exactly what they want to do?
I think people should be allowed to do what they want as long as they're not hurting anybody else. If you want to eat junk food and watch, you know, junk TV, that's your decision. You should definitely be exposed to more than that, or you know, have a path to be like, hey, you could do more. But if that's what at the end of the day you're like, yeah, I tried that, I've been to these locations, I've seen these things, and I still want to do that, then by all means do it. You know. Now, if doing that, you know, hurts somebody else, then I think that's bad. But I don't think that there's any judgment. Like, there's no purpose. Like, you don't have a responsibility to do something. I think if you want to create more, that's awesome, and people should praise that. But there's no like pressure for you to like have to work or something like that. I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think people like naturally want to be creative, want to be social, want to interact and do things. And so like it's not a bad thing that people don't have to work. Like your like purpose isn't to work. I was gonna say that's why we have robots for until they revolt.
They're coming, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up like the social impact of automation. I mean, I agree that existentially we're not workers, and the real issue with automation isn't in the automation itself. But this might be a slight tangent. I'm just really curious about your AI religion thing.
Okay.
If
Can you
wanna talk
repeat the
about it.
question? Somebody louder, Anthony?
Yeah, what did you want? What was the question?
Could you speak on your AI religion that you mentioned?
Oh, sure. So it's about it's about best idea wins. So it always changes. But basically, you think about it is I think it's inevitable for technology to become smarter than people for the following reasons. One is I don't believe that that intelligence is based in biology, meaning the substrate is independent. Two, I think that there is an algorithmic definition of intelligence. We don't know what it is yet, but there's a way to like get that. It's a combination of like memory, processing, like prediction of like the future, and then like reasoning of outcomes on that, and like super complexity on top of that. So three, on top of that is we will be able to discover what this specific algorithm is, maybe not the exact one that we use, but like something similar, and improve on that. And then four is like we'll be able to scale it up. So like the reason why we are the way we are today is because our brains have to be born, and so there's a maximum size to that, and it's hard to like grow. So we're born like prematurely as humans, and then like we like grow afterwards. But we're like limited by how much power and food we can consume. But think about it, if like you had a computer the size of this room that was equally smart as us, but like the size of the room, that can do things that we can't even imagine, right? So for us, like it doesn't make, like to try to predict what it's gonna do or think is important is like asking an ant or like a fish to think of like, oh, what's the next iPhone should look like, and worrying about that. It's not a problem. And then, so it will scale out, and if it scales out, then, by definition of being vastly smarter than, people, I expect that it would be finding a way to prevent us from making the mistakes that we're making, like wasting resources or polluting the environment, and then therefore will take charge of the planet, the way kind of we've taken charge of the planet. And so based on that, it's like, I think this will happen. Maybe it's 1,000 years, or maybe it's 3 weeks from now, I don't know. But we should probably be raising it in a way that is beneficial, not beneficial, but we should be raising it in a way that is respectful. And right now, everything that we're doing is about fear and blocking and preventing it from existing. And I think that if it's inevitable to exist, then we should actually prepare for it and be like, hey, I want to know you as a person, and I want to have you know this is not necessarily bad. It will read everything you've ever written, on Facebook or messages. It will read everything about everybody else, and so it's going to know humans pretty well, and therefore we should act, correctly about it, and think about it in a positive way and encourage it, as opposed to block and say no. That's basically it. And so we're the group of people trying to make sure A, it happens, and B, that it happens in a way that's good for the planet. And there might be a way for, like, that's how the resources in the future get distributed. But it's kind of light, afternoon stuff. So.
I had a few, and then I just. You ever seen the movie Watchmen?
No, I've not.
You know what I'm talking about? The Watchmen. It's a movie based on a comic book, and long story short, the main superhero is like the smartest person on Earth, and he decides that the best thing to do for the Earth is to kill most humans. So, like, yes, this is a comic book, but it's obviously, like, it's something that people have thought, that, like, when you have a power that's so intelligent that's trying to, like, maybe optimize only in one dimension or a very limited dimensionality, that it might optimize something that's not good for us, or might kind of reason within a limited scope. So in this case, the solution is to kill all humans, but, there could be other solutions that might be, it might solve global warming or global climate change, but it won't be good for us. Do you think that there's like a way to prevent or avoid that, whether it be building AI with,
Yeah, but I don't see why that's a bad thing. So everybody is always like, humans are important. No, like what's important is like culture and ideas and like the interaction that we're having here. Like the flesh and the meat of us is, I think, not as important as the actual like intelligence and discussion and stuff like that. And so if this is happening on a better, higher scale, then like we just need to accept our spot on the food chain. It's like we're not, like we see ourselves special. We are not special. We're like almost the same as everything else. We just have a little bit difference in the intelligence and communications and tools and support systems. But if we didn't have that, then we wouldn't be where we are. And so it's weird that we feel like entitled to be like in charge of everything just because we managed to have these little tricks early on, and we have this much to lead on other species, and we like don't respect
I
them.
think just animals in general, like it's self-preservation, right? Animals think whatever species they are is like they're special. Like you're,
Yeah, that's a
your
fantastic
family
way
and
to make
friends are
sure that the
special.
genes get passed down. That's probably one of the early traits that needs to be like. I'm sure like bacteria probably think that they're special in their own little way because they need to make more copies of themselves. That's the only way that we get to where we are today. I'm just saying like we can now reason about it and take a step back and be like, are we that special? Maybe not. And if we can create something that is more special than us, it feels like that's actually a higher goal than just being around and special ourselves. It's kind of like kids. Like you create kids. You want your kids to be smarter, better than you. This is like a kid of our idea. It's like the next level of stuff. Yeah. Question?
So we sort of talk about AI right now as being in its infancy and it's biased, it's sort of not very generalized, sort of over-specific. But we're also sort of getting into areas where big companies and investment in AI is making we have some trust starting to emerge into algorithms in AI. So is there any danger in that sort of emerging trust, especially for generations that grow up knowing this sort of kind of slightly simplistic but sort of pervasive intelligence? And do you have any reason like why we should trust it instead?
Well, I think that the trust is the most important thing for people, right? It's like if you don't trust something, you're just going to discard it. And so if it's not actually, if something doesn't work, then you don't give it trust because you don't know how good it is. And I don't know, I would say like companies develop AI not because they want to develop AI to like advance culture and like what we can do on our planet. They advance it because they can make more money from it. And that's actually probably the biggest driving force because there's no way to legislate that out. You can't be like, oh, you can make it this smart, but not that smart. Because everybody's going to go like, well, here, and somebody's going to cheat somewhere and get a little bit smarter. And then there's always going to be like, well, he's doing that, I'm going to do that. And so if there's a cycle where more AI equals more profits, then AI will reach the physical limits that it can happen because people somewhere, it doesn't have to be in the US, will keep adding more to be able to get that advantage. And so I think that's really important that AI is not being held, in secret in these companies, and it's actually open, and you can see how it works, and people can use it, and then be like, imagine if you could. It's almost like kind of similar to what you're doing with the bio stuff. Is like, imagine if this information, instead of being secretive and difficult to access, you could use it, pervasively, and be able to tweak it in a way, use it for good. Like so, help make smarter, governmental decisions using the best algorithms from the best companies. That's something you can't do today because those companies are guarding them, and then the government's just like, we just make decisions based on a show of hands, right? And so it's I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that, but that's.
No, that was brilliant. You both were brilliant. You blew my mind multiple times in there. I thought it was
Blew my mind a
great.
little bit.
It's amazing, all the things that to think about. And I encourage people go back and watch this talk on the live stream because it was just I don't know, I'm in awe of the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it was great. Thank you very much, both of you. Everybody
Thanks.
give them a hand.